Bomber Fox at your service. This will be part 2 of my video on immigration. Now that we have an idea of who is behind this policy, let's get into the specifics of Trump's zero tolerance policy, which went into effect in May and ended due to public outcry. Despite deportations being at record levels since Obama's presidency, Trump wanted to make things worse by separating children from their parents when they were found at or across the border. I can only say that this separation policy was done out of malice because I cannot find any other motive for this. It is well known that Trump will never take responsibility for his actions, so it is no small wonder that Trump pulls the wife-beater logic, "Look what you made me do," when Democrats don't go along with them. Before we go into more specific examples, let's go over the detention system in the US and the companies behind them. We just had to do something that is so obvious to anyone with a brain cell or two that will result in horrific corruption and abuses of power. We started contracting out to private prisons and set up ways for those private prisons to influence politics. ICE was created in November 2002 and begun operations in March 2003 as an agent in the Department of Homeland Security. ICE contracts out to private detention companies like CoreCivic, formerly Corrections Corporation of America, Geo Group, and MTC. I'll be going over each of these companies in this video, as well as some cases involving the facilities they run. CoreCivic is one of the largest owners of private detention facilities in the U.S. They claim to have a single purpose of tackling America's recidivism crisis. Let's see how well they do that. Despite their motto, CoreCivic has pledged massive sum of money to politicians and political committees that have supported mass incarceration and Trump's zero-tolerance policy. The private prison industry has made large gains after Trump was elected, as the stock indices have indicated, and more immigrants are being detained. I will go over some cases involving the detention facilities that CoreCivic runs and their handling of immigrants. CoreCivic makes money by also treating detainees who are even waiting for their cases to be settled like prisoners. Sometimes even worse. They say that detainees are paid, but that is only $1.50 per 6 hours of work. That's $1.50. They say this is voluntary, but what the hell are you going to do other than work in a detention center? Yeah, your options are severely limited, so these companies are exploiting immigrants who are running from gang violence and political instability and paying them a wage that would be unconscionable to most Americans, but hey, because they are foreign detainees, it's a-okay, right? Despite the conditions of these centers like the Otay Mesa in San Diego, CoreCivic is just expanding them as they are becoming overcrowded due to the new policy of the Trump administration and not cleaning up their act. The conditions inside the Otay Mesa Center have been described as being overcrowded, having a lack of food, having a lack of medical care, etc. The Houston Contract Detention Facility has been labeled the deadliest detention facility in the U.S. due to either detainee suicide or severe lack of medical care. Specifics will be in the link in the description. The Stewart Detention Center in Georgia is rather dysfunctional, so much so that reporters have to wait long periods of time in between gates, so a likely stalling tactic. The Stewart Center also has a very high deportation rate of detainees because they mostly house those unable to afford an attorney. Now, for the GEO group, they also claim to support rehabilitation programs and that it is committed to rehabilitating prisoners. Let's see if that is true. Just like Core Civic, their core mission was a dismal failure. Of course, because such mission statements are just a cover for the public. Let's go into some examples. The most deaths in the GEO group owns the deadliest detention center in the US as of last year. The highest death counts in GEO group detention centers, according to the Houston Chronicle, were in the Jenna LaSalle detention facility with 18 deaths, and the Adelanto Correctional Facility with 18 deaths. This might not seem significant, but there is a good reason why there are so many deaths in these centers. The conditions of medical care were so bad that they had to turn it over to an outside organization. The GEO group also forces detainees to perform slave labor for $1 a day, which the detainees must use to purchase basic necessities. If you're imprisoning someone, you better give them the basic necessities for free, as they can't exactly go out and get a job. According to the ACLU, one of GEO Group's prisons facilitated the torture of detainees who tried to blow the whistle on the conditions inside a facility in Aurora, Colorado. The GEO Group is one of the private prison companies that propped up Donald Trump's candidacy and likely is making illegal contributions. The last of the detention corporations I mentioned is MTC, or Management and Training Corporation. They have a similar slogan as the rest, and they do not uphold it. MTC plans to reopen the Willacy County Correctional Center in Raymondville, Texas. According to an article on PRI.org, Carl Takei said that the facility in Raymondville was closed down because of reports of widespread sexual abuse, overcrowding, and unsanitary conditions. Eventually, the conditions and treatment of inmates got so bad a prison riot broke out. The guards used rather heavy-handed tactics to quell a strike. They even used inmate gangs to keep the detainees in line. Added to the abuses are the counts of child molestation and abuse that goes on in more than two-thirds of the shelters housing immigrant children. These private detention centers are nothing short of concentration camps, and ICE is nothing but a Gestapo agency working for the profit of private prisons. The President of the U.S. is a criminal fascist ideologue who is going to ruin the lives of all Americans and even those abroad unless stopped. These abuses can only be stopped if ICE and the entire for-profit prison industry is abolished, and all the assets owned by the private prison industry is expropriated post haste. They profit off the enslavement, detention, and abuse of detainees. The private detention industry was about to lose a bunch of contracts with the federal government during Obama's presidency, but Jeff Sessions swooped in to rescue these companies so they will continue running and making the lives of immigrants a living hell.